The envelope was already open when I got to the table. My father's lawyer had placed it face down in front of my brother like a gift. My brother who hadn't sent a single check in 6 years. My brother who didn't know our mother's doctor's name. I had flown in that morning from Cincinnati, 4 hours on 2 connections, still in the blazer I'd worn to work the day before. And when I sat down and the lawyer slid a second envelope toward me, thinner, sealed, I already knew. I already knew before I read it. Before I looked at my brother's face, which was very carefully not looking at mine. Before my father cleared his throat and said, "Marcus contributed in ways that aren't always visible, Nora. 6 years, $46,800. Not always visible." What happened next in that conference room on the 4th floor of Hensley and Morse in Delwood, Tennessee, changed what I understood about loyalty, about family, and about exactly how long a quiet person can keep quiet before she stops. I'll get there. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with the story. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from. My name is Nora. I'm 34. And this is what happens when the one who gave everything finally decides she is done giving. I grew up in Delwood, Tennessee. Population 11,000 on a good census year. The kind of town where the football field has better lighting than the hospital, and everyone's business travels faster than the weekly paper. We lived on Carver Street, 2 blocks from the Piggly Wiggly, in a 4-bedroom house my parents bought in 1991 for $62,000. My father, Gerald Hayden, 67, retired pipefitter, a man whose love language was a firm handshake and whose criticism arrived wrapped in a story about someone else's failure. My mother, Ruth Hayden, 64, retired school secretary, softer, warmer, the parent who drove to your school play but gave the credit to whoever reminded her to put it on the calendar. And Marcus, my brother Marcus, 38, 4 years older, handsome in the way that forgives a lot of things it shouldn't. Sales manager at a car dealership in Nashville. Drive 2 hours, close deals, come home smelling like cologne and confidence. Marcus, who at 38 still called my mother Ruthie like she was someone at a party he was charming. I left Delwood at 22 for a nursing program in Cincinnati. Came back for holidays, for emergencies, for the things families don't say out loud but expect you to show up for anyway. I became a registered nurse. Critical care. ICU. I learned how to read a room the way you read a patient, what's said, what isn't, where the body is lying even when the voice sounds steady. That skill would matter later. The call came on a Wednesday in October, 6 years ago. I was pulling a double shift at Mercy General when my phone buzzed in my locker 5 times in a row. Marcus. 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 Dad. Marcus again. My father's second heart attack. I drove to Delwood that Friday. Marcus was already there, sitting in the recliner he always sat in, eating from a bag of Lay's, watching college football with the volume too high. My mother was at the kitchen table with a folder full of papers she didn't understand, discharge instructions, medication schedules, a cardiac rehab calendar, a list of follow-up appointments that overlapped with each other, and with nothing she owned a car to get to. I sat down and went through every page. Marcus called his wife from the back porch and talked for 40 minutes. That weekend, I made the appointments, picked up the prescriptions, set up the pill organizer, called the insurance company about the coverage gap, found a cardiac rehab center 12 minutes from their house, and enrolled my father with his verbal consent because he wouldn't do it himself. When I left Sunday evening, my mother stood in the driveway and held my wrist with both hands. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Nora." I said, "You've got Marcus." She nodded like that meant something we both believed. It didn't. Marcus Hayden, 38. My brother. 4 inches taller, 20 decibels louder, and present in the room in the way a television is present. You're aware of it. It fills the space, but it doesn't actually engage with you. He called our parents once a week. A 12-minute call. I know because my mother told me, and she always sounded grateful, the way people sound grateful for something they expected to be less. His wife, Candace, 37, did not like me in the particular way that women sometimes don't like the person who quietly does everything without being asked, because it makes the not doing visible. Their house in Nashville had a pool they posted photos of every June. Diane Crutcher, 61. My parents' neighbor for 22 years. The woman who noticed things, who called me in year 3 and said, "Nora, Your daddy drove to the pharmacy at 10 at night because he ran out of blood pressure medication and there was no one to go for him. Diane is the reason I started the monthly transfers. Gerald Pierce, 58. My father's attorney. Quiet man, deliberate voice. I had met him once at a church potluck when I was 17. He had been handling my father's affairs for 11 years. He was the one who called me the week after my father's 79th birthday and said, "Nora, I think you need to come home." He didn't explain why. He didn't have to. Year 1, I drove down 6 times. Appointments, medication changes, a fall my mother had in November that wasn't serious but could have been. I put my parents on a family phone plan so I could monitor their data usage and know they were using their phones. Marcus sent a fruit basket at Christmas with a card that said "Thinking of you both." It was a nice basket, pears wrapped in gold foil. Year 2, my father's kidneys began to decline. Nothing catastrophic yet, the nephrologist said, but a trajectory. We needed to watch the numbers. I requested the portal access so I could track his labs from Cincinnati. I created a spreadsheet, creatinine levels, GFR readings, fluid intake targets. I shared it with Marcus in a text. He replied, "Thanks. Dad seems okay though, right?" Year 3, my mother was diagnosed with early-stage macular degeneration. She couldn't drive at night anymore, then not at all by spring. Their town had no Uber, one taxi, and a bus that ran 3 days a week on a schedule that suited no one who had doctor's appointments. I began paying for a medical transport service, $420 a month. I did not tell Marcus. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe I was protecting him from having to decide whether to help. Maybe I was protecting myself from finding out he wouldn't. Year 4, the roof. Their roof had been failing for 2 years. My father knew, had been managing it with buckets in the back bedroom during heavy rain, had not told either of his children because he did not want to be a burden. It was Diane who texted me a photo, a brown stain spreading across the ceiling above my parents' bed, the size of a welcome mat. $22,000. I did not have $22,000. I had 14 in savings, and a 401k I was not going to touch. I took out a personal loan, $22,000 at 7% over 5 years. I did not tell Marcus. He posted photos of his kitchen remodel in February. Quartz countertops. Finally got our dream kitchen, #blessed. Year 5, my father's decline accelerated. Dialysis 3 times a week. I flew in every 6 weeks, sometimes every 4. I used all my PTO, and then some vacation I borrowed from the following year. I negotiated with my floor manager. I did not sleep well in Delwood. I slept on the couch because Marcus's old room was now storage, and my room had been converted to what my mother called a craft room, though I never saw evidence of crafts. I lay on that couch and listened to the house settle and did math in my head and then stopped doing math because the number had gotten too large to sit comfortably in my chest. Year 6 was the last one. My father spent 4 months in and out of the hospital. When he came home for the last time in early April, it was under hospice care. I took a leave of absence. Unpaid. 8 weeks. I moved into the house on Carver Street, sleeping on the couch with a baby monitor on the coffee table, so I'd hear him in the night. Marcus came twice. 3 days in February. He flew in, flew out, told 3 people at his work that he'd been caring for his dying father, which I know because Candace mentioned it on Facebook. And 4 days in March, during which he watched a lot of television and told my father stories about his sales numbers that my father could not follow but nodded at anyway because Gerald Hayden was a man who valued effort, even when the effort was performance. My father died on a Tuesday morning in April. Peacefully, which is the word we use when someone isn't fighting anymore because the fight is finished. I was holding his hand. My mother was on his other side. Marcus was in the parking lot of a Cracker Barrel 60 miles away, having stopped for breakfast on the drive down. He got there 2 hours later. He cried in the way that photographs well. The funeral was on Saturday. I arranged everything, with Diane's help and a funeral home director named Pat who was kind in the specific way that people are kind when they have witnessed enough grief to know what it actually needs. Marcus gave the eulogy. He told a story about my father teaching him to throw a baseball. It was a good story. I had never heard it before, and I had known my father for 34 years. I sat in the front pew next to my mother and looked at the flower arrangements I had chosen and paid for and felt something go very quiet inside me. Not grief, something underneath grief, something that had been accumulating for 6 years and finally had nowhere else to go. The reading of the will was 10 days after the funeral. Gerald Pierce's office, 4th floor of a building on Main Street that smelled like carpet cleaner and old paper. My mother could not attend. Her doctor had advised against it. She sat at home with Diane, who had brought a casserole in her complete and irreplaceable presence. Marcus arrived 5 minutes late. He'd driven up from Nashville, and he smelled like the fast food he'd eaten in the car. He sat across from me, not next to me, and scrolled his phone until Gerald Pierce came in and set 2 envelopes on the table. Gerald read the summary first. The house on Carver Street, to my mother for her lifetime. After her death, to be split equally between Marcus and me. The savings account, $43,000, the accumulated savings of 2 working lives and 4 decades of careful spending, split equally, $21,500 to each of us. Then Gerald picked up the 2 envelopes. He slid the first to Marcus, thicker, sealed with a red wax stamp like my father had chosen it carefully, which I knew he had because my father did everything carefully. Marcus turned it over but didn't open it. He slid the second to me, thinner, sealed with a standard envelope flap. I knew before I touched it, not because I am prescient, but because I am a nurse, and I have learned to read information the body gives before the voice does. Gerald's eyes had not met mine in 7 minutes. Inside the thin envelope was a letter in my father's handwriting. 3 paragraphs. I will not read you every word, because some of it is mine to keep. But the part that is relevant, the part that lives in my chest like a stone I have not yet decided what to do with, was the second paragraph. Nora, I know you have given more than I ever asked. I want you to know I saw it. I know Marcus hasn't always been present. But Marcus carries his own burdens in ways that aren't always visible. I divided the estate as I saw fair. I hope you understand. I sat with those 2 sentences for a long time. Marcus carries his own burdens in ways that aren't always visible. I looked at Marcus. He had opened his envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and a separate document, a deed. A piece of land. 2 acres on the edge of town that our father had purchased in 1998 and held in his name. Never developed, never sold. An appraiser's note, attached, dated 3 weeks before my father died, valued at $81,000. Marcus looked up from the deed. Then he looked at me, and he had the grace, or the fear, to look away first. Marcus contributed in ways that aren't always visible, my father's attorney said, then stopped, because there was nothing else to say. I was quiet for a long time. The kind of quiet I'd learned in the ICU, not empty, not passive. The quiet of someone who is reading every monitor in the room and deciding what the next move is. Then I said, Gerald, I'd like copies of everything in this file. The will, the deed, all communications. I'll need them for a matter I'll explain shortly. Gerald looked at me. He nodded once. He knew. Attorneys who have sat across from enough families know the moment a quiet person decides to stop being quiet. He had seen it before. Marcus said, Nora, come on. Dad made his wishes clear. I looked at him. He did, I said. And now I'm going to make mine. I drove to my mother's house on Carver Street. Diane was in the kitchen washing dishes. My mother was at the table with both hands around a coffee cup she wasn't drinking. She looked up when I came in, and something in my face made her set the cup down. Nora. That was all she said. I sat across from her. I had the envelope in my bag. I had the folder Gerald had made copies of. I also had something else. I opened my phone and pulled up a spreadsheet, not the one about my father's kidney function. A different one. One I had started in year 3 and updated every month for the past 4 years, not out of anger, not planning anything, but because I was a person who organized difficult things into documents so they didn't consume me. 6 years of records. Dates, amounts, descriptions. Medical transport service. 89 months at $420. Roof loan. $22,000 principal, $4,600 in interest accrued and paid. Flights. I had flown in 31 times. Hotel never, I stayed on the couch. Meals, medication pickups, the hospital parking garage on 11 separate admissions. Supplementary costs for the hospice period. The things insurance didn't cover, the things nobody asks about because they assume it worked itself out. $46,812. Not always visible. I slid the phone across the table to my mother. She read it for a long time. Diane at the sink, had stopped washing dishes. I didn't know, my mother said. Her voice was very small. I know you didn't, I said. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry about it. But Mom, I need you to understand what the last 6 years looked like. Not because I want you to feel guilty. Because Marcus is about to inherit $81,000 in land that I helped make it possible for Dad to hold on to. And I think you should know that before you sign anything else. My mother looked at me for a long time. Then she looked at the phone. Then she said, I want Marcus here. Marcus drove up the next morning. He sat at the same table. My mother sat at the head of it, which she did not usually do. Diane made herself invisible in the back room, which was its own kind of presence. I did not yell. I did not cry. I slid the phone across the table the same way I had slid it to my mother, and I said, Take as long as you need. Marcus read it. He scrolled up. He scrolled back down. His jaw moved like he was going to say something several times before he actually said anything. When he finally spoke, it was quietly. I didn't know you were doing all this. I know. I would have helped. I let that sit for a moment. Then, the roof was in year 4. I texted you about the roof. He closed his eyes. I thought you were just venting. My mother said Marcus. Just his name. The way mothers say a name when the conversation has run out of runway. I had brought one document with me. Not a lawyer's letter, not a formal demand. A 1-page agreement I had typed and printed at the FedEx in town the evening before. It was simple. Marcus would sign over 1 acre of the 2-acre parcel to me, valued at approximately $40,000 by the same appraiser. The remaining acre, worth $41,000, he would keep. The difference, roughly $6,000, I was releasing. Not because it was fair, because I wanted to be finished with the accounting. This isn't everything I'm owed, I said. We both know that. But I don't want to spend the next 3 years fighting about it, and I don't want Mom in the middle of it. This is what I'm asking for. It's less than I'm owed. I need you to look at that number and understand that. Marcus looked at my mother. She looked at the table. He picked up the pen. He signed it. Gerald Pierce handled the deed transfer. It took 3 weeks. The acre of land became mine on a Thursday afternoon when I was back in Cincinnati, eating lunch at my desk between patients. A notification on my phone from Gerald's office. Attached, the new deed, my name, printed in clean black type. I forwarded it to my personal email, put my phone back in my pocket, and went back to work. I sold the land 8 months later to a developer who was building townhouses on the east side of Delwood. They paid $38,000, $2,000 under appraisal, which I accepted because I wanted it done. I used $12,000 to pay off the remaining balance of the roof loan. I put $26,000 in savings. The first time I had $26,000 in savings. Marcus and I don't talk much now. We text on birthdays, holidays, sometimes. It isn't cold. There's no active wound. It's more like a room you used to go into all the time, and then one day you just stop going in, and eventually you stop noticing the door. My mother and I are closer than we have ever been. I think honesty does that. Not the kind that performs itself, but the quiet kind, the kind that arrives with a spreadsheet and says, I need you to understand what this cost. She calls me every Sunday. We talk for 40 minutes sometimes. She told me in October that she'd been sending cards to Diane every month to thank her. I said, Mom, Diane lives 3 doors down. She said, I know. That's how you do it properly, Nora. I started seeing a therapist in August. Not because I was unraveling, but because I had a pattern to understand. The years of saying yes when what I meant was I'll do it because no one else will, which isn't yes, that's something else entirely. My therapist's name is Dr. Anand. She asked me in our 3rd session why I never told my parents what I was paying. I thought about it for a long time. I think I wanted them to see it without being told, I said. And did they? My mother did. Eventually. And your father? I sat with that one for a while. He saw it. He wrote me a letter that said so. He just decided it didn't change what he was going to do. And what do you do with that? I looked at the window behind her. The one that faced a parking lot with a small tree someone had planted in a concrete cutout, the kind of stubborn small tree that grows in difficult places and somehow keeps going. I'm still figuring that out, I said. I think that's an honest answer. I think it might be the most honest answer I've ever given. Here is what I know now that I didn't know when I was 28 and driving to Delwood for the 3rd time in a year, telling myself it wasn't a burden. It was just what family does. Being the one who shows up is not the same as being valued. You can do everything right and still not be seen. And the people who love you can fail to notice the cost of what you give them, not because they're monsters, but because you made it invisible. Because you were so good at carrying it quietly that they never had to ask. I don't regret any of the years. My father died with someone holding his hand. My mother has a roof over her head. I know what I'm capable of. I know I am someone who can be counted on. That's not nothing. But I also know this. The next time I spend 6 years of my life, it will be on someone who counts. If you've ever been the one in your family who quietly holds everything together while someone else takes the credit, I see you. You are not invisible to everyone. You just need to make sure you're not invisible to yourself. Thank you for being here all the way to the end. Please subscribe if this stayed with you, and leave a comment. Have you ever kept quiet about something you gave, hoping someone would notice without being told? I want to know I'm not the only one. There's another story waiting for you. I'll see you there.